Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Plant Healthcare Interim Results Investor Presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your question in the box below and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. I'd like to also remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand over to Chris Richards, Jeff Hovey, CFO, and Jeff Tweedy, COO of Plant Healthcare. Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Richards. I'm CEO of Plant Healthcare. Just to tell you a little bit about me, I've been in agriculture all my life. I spent 20 years in a company which was ICI when it started and Syngenta by the time I left. I was headhunted in 2003 to become CEO of a Japan-based private equity-backed company called Arista Life Science. I was associated with that company first as CEO, then as chairman until 2015. In that time, we went through two different owners, and we took the company to sales of about $2 billion. And I've been involved since with Plant Healthcare since early 2013, the last 3 years as CEO. So we're very lucky that this format allows us to introduce the guys who actually do the work. I'm based in the UK, but this is a US company. And we're joined today by Jeff Hovey, CFO, and Jeff Tweedy, COO, both based in Raleigh, North Carolina. So, Mr. Hovey, would you like to introduce yourself?
I will. Hi, Jeff Hovey, Chief Financial Officer. Good afternoon again. I've been with Plant Healthcare since September of 2013. Prior to that, I worked for a southeastern U.S. office supply company. I was a corporate controller there, and I helped the company sell its business to Staples. I am a certified public accountant, first in the state of Ohio, and then now in the state of North Carolina. Excuse me, I'm in charge of finance, HR, and IT, and I grew up in the Midwest in the state of Michigan.
Good afternoon, Jeff Tweedy. I'm COO. I've been with Plant Healthcare almost 3 years now. I, like Chris, have been in ag all my life. I spent 9 years at Arista Life Science, and prior to that, around 11 years with Syngenta and Legacy Seneca. Started out in more of the technical and R&D roles, but in the last 10 years have been mainly focused on the commercial and operations side of the business. And I grew up in the Midwest as well.
Great, thanks, guys. So, Mark, could we put up the slides now? I'm going to turn my camera off. Devon bandwidth is not great. So, if we could then go directly, skipping past the disclaimers, which I'll take as read, to what do we do as a company? What makes us distinctive? We are in biological products which help farmers to grow better crops, healthier crops, better yield. Biological products means that these are highly environmentally friendly. This is a really good sustainability story. Agriculture wants to move all the time to greener ways, less use of chemicals, greener ways of growing crops. We are at the forefront of that. We have two sides to our business, the commercial side of existing products that we sell and new technology. On the commercial side, the heart of our business is a really fascinating product called Harpin alpha beta, which is a recombinant protein. And we'll tell you more about it as we go through. It stimulates plants to grow better. You just need small amounts of the plant, and it switches on the plant and makes it grow better. Now, the important thing here is the last 3 years, particularly under Jeff Tweedy's leadership, we've repositioned that commercial business, and global sales are now growing well. So 15% revenue growth in the first half of this year, and that's a good rate of growth for us, our target going forward. And that's based upon tremendous market access that we've got. Tweedy will talk to you about big markets that we're going into now with major distributors. And that gives us access to 30 million hectares of land. So we've got a huge market to go for. Harpin Alpha Beta is a profitable product with a gross margin of greater than 70%. And our commercial business from this year onwards will be cash generative. If we did not have new technology, we would be a profitable cash generative company in 2020. However, we do have new technology. We've been investing in what we call pre-tech for the last 7 years. Pre-tech stands for plant response elicitor technology. This is inspired by Harpin Alpha Beta. These are really exciting products. We call this vaccines for plants. These are tiny little molecules, little peptides, which when they touch either the seed or the leaf of the plant, the whole plant is as if their immune system has been stimulated. So it's not just one product, it's a whole bunch, it's a platform. We've shown that we can make them very cheaply, so they're good margin, and they're very effective in the field. Now, we've spent more than $20 million since 2013, and the company today, we're going to be launching our first product, regulation permitting, in 2021 into markets worth £5 billion or more. So this is a really exciting time for us with pre-tech turning all that investment into commercial success. So that being said, I'd now like to pass to Jeff Tweedy to take you through the commercial business first.
Thank you, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, we've spent quite a bit of time realigning what we call our channel and channel agreements. Prior to my arrival, Plant Healthcare we're doing business with several small players in each of these markets, and it really limited our market access. So we've realigned, and we'll get into some examples of that in a minute, but really working with large distributors. And our goal is to continue to expand that. So we've done it in the US, we've done it in Brazil, now we want to do it in Europe. As Chris mentioned, our gross margins with Harpin are great, 73%. So it gives an opportunity for us to get into unique relationships with distributors, and they make a good margin, and we do as well. We have really three focus areas we'll talk about today. Number one is Brazil sugarcane. We believe this has a market potential of 17 million, and I'll touch on that in a minute. The second one is corn in the USA as a seed treatment. We've had a new relationship with a partner there with sales potential around 5 million. And then the last one is our newest relationship in the specialty market, and again, a potential of 5 million in sales. So we're really positioned well with these distributors, and one of the reasons that we moved to these large distributors, besides market access, is we need the visibility of sales. And so we have good relationships with these customers. It gives us, we have good plans we put in place with them. They're much better at that than smaller distributors. Gives us visibility and forecasting, so it really helps us plan out our top line growth as we look at our business year over year. The other thing that I'll mention is that we've really done a good job of reducing our cash burn. So if you look at cash burn from 2017 to 2020, it's almost in half. And that's really about how we manage our working capital, but also payment terms with our customers and inventory. And Jeff will touch on that in his section. So we can turn to the next slide. Just drilling down into it, sugarcane in Brazil. We've been doing work in this market for 4 years now, and our yields have averaged an average yield of 23%, which is a return on investment from a grower of almost 10x. And what's interesting about this technology, if you look to the right, the picture, you have sugarcane, far right treated with Harpin, far left of the picture untreated. The visual effect is very dramatic, which you don't always see with biologicals. The other thing that we notice is that they get a very consistent yield increase in sugarcane. Typical biologicals, if it works 80% of the time, that's really good. We see it almost 100% of the time in sugarcane. So we've had great results technically in the field. Copacabana is our distributor. They are a large cooperative in São Paulo State. Half of the sugarcane hectares in Brazil are located in that state. And they're a very good partner because they give us market access, which is what we need, and we have an exclusive relationship with them, so they have their own brand. In 2020, we've really seen a good growth of on-ground sales despite the low ethanol prices. And in fact, in one region, we grew almost 5x on ground. So our plan is to really increase resources in the back half of this year to really drive growth and start to maximize the sales. One question we get is, why is it not growing faster? Sugarcane is a crop that's grown once a year. And so a grower will try it, then the next year he'll try a little more, and then the third year you'll start to see more of an adoption. And we've seen larger adoption on their hectares, and we're seeing that start to come forward now, and that's why we're putting some more resources. As I mentioned, if we were to get 10% share, this would be equivalent to 17 million in revenue for us. And we do believe that on the continued path, in the next 4 to 5 years, that is not an unreasonable goal to achieve. Next slide. Our next market is the corn seed treatment. We have a partnership, an exclusive arrangement with the second largest distributor in the U.S. for this product. And this is actually, the picture on the right is from this past year. The corn on the right was treated with our product as a seed treatment. The corn on the left was not. This corn is under severe drought stress. And that's one of the great things that our product brings, is applied as a seed treatment to corn. Corn gets under stress, which can happen quite frequently in the Midwest in the spring. You see a much healthier corn plant, which in turn yields better. And we see anywhere from 3 to 5% over our trials the last couple of years. We have a strong partner with broad market access. And this year they doubled their on-ground sales versus 2019. And 2019 was a pretty difficult year for all companies just due to the excessive rain and reduced corn acres. So we feel really good about our on-ground sales and have high expectations going into the next season. We do have a plan for a launch of a new pack size with this customer this fall for smaller growers or first-time users. So we'll bring in people that have not used it before. And then we're working on a second generation product to be launched in 2022, depending on when we get the registration. And the last point I'll make is this is a big market, and we have a good partner. 5% market share on 92 million acres would be 5 million in revenue for us. And again, to give you a relative size of what that is, that would be equivalent of one state of a major corn growing state. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities. And we believe that's very achievable. If you go to the next slide. And our last market, this is our newest market, probably most exciting, or one I'm most excited about. We have a relationship with Wilbur Ellis that we signed an agreement with last year. Again, an exclusive arrangement. And we've been using our technology on specialty crops for a long time, especially in the West Coast, where you have apples, pears, citrus, and grapes. We have very good data and very good results. We had weak distribution, and that's why we moved to Wilbur Ellis in 2019. And sales ex Plant Healthcare have doubled from the prior year. They have a strong presence. They have a lot of sales and technical people, so that's very good for us. They do a lot of trials themselves, so it keeps our expenses down, but gives us broad market access. We did receive a registration in California this year, and the plan is to launch in the fourth quarter into 2 crops, almonds and grapes. In California, you have to pick out certain crops and do several years worth of data before you can add them. So we will continue to add, but those will be the 2 focus crops and the largest, and where our partner has the biggest strength. Wilbur is a good product because they're focused on biologicals and they value our relationship. They have a lot of companies that call on them, but they don't bring them very good data. And that's one thing that we do, is that we have good data, and we do those trials in combination with their products. So our goal is to really enhance and build out a product portfolio, combining our technology with their technology in the next 4 to 5 years. This is a big market. It's $1 billion of inputs just in the West Coast. And if we were to get 1% of that, that's 10 million in revenue for us. So it's a very attractive market. And biologicals are being demanded by consumers. So it's a good fit, a good timing for us, and an excellent partner. Good. Chris?
Great. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. And I hope everybody on the line, you can see why we're excited about growth in our commercial business. What I'd like to do now briefly is go to our new technology and give you a quick overview of where we are with that. So this is our new pre-tech technology, plant response elicitors, vaccines for plants. So remember, these are little peptides which, when you put on the seed or the leaf, they turn the whole plant on and you're switching on the immune system. The plants are bigger, stronger, better able to fight drought and disease, and improves yield and very often the quality as well. Particularly, it's environmentally friendly. These products, like harpin alpha beta, break down very quickly in the environment, so you don't get any concerns as you do with conventional agrochemicals about the people or the environment. It's a unique mode of action. Nobody else has products like this. It's not just one product, it's a whole platform with many, many products. At the moment, we're working on 6 because we want to bring the first products to market, but there are many more behind. And we have designed these from the beginning to be successful in conventional agriculture. Many people say, well, why don't you target organic agriculture? And that's a great thing, but we all love organic agriculture, but organic only represents about 5% of global farming. I'm interested in the 95%. And we can work together with conventional farmers to make their farming operations more sustainable and more environmentally friendly, which is in line with what governments around the world and indeed farmers generally want to be doing. So on the bottom here, this is patented technology. We were excited earlier this year, our first patents were granted in the US. We've got about 50 patents filed, and we're expecting more patents to be issued soon. We have established low-cost manufacturing, and I want to come back to that because it's really, really important. And we're progressing with registration. So after this $20 million plus investment, we are poised to launch in very, very valuable markets worth $5 billion or £5 billion. Now, I just want to pick out, first of all, from Pretech, one product and one launch which we're very, very excited about. And this is in Brazil, and the product is targeting soy. And there are a lot of soybeans in Brazil. And soya in Brazil is very susceptible to disease. So soybean farmers in Brazil spend more than $2 billion spraying chemicals for disease control. Now, we have a totally revolutionary product, a biological product, which you apply to the soy seed when you plant it. And we're showing we've got 2 years of strong results now, improved disease control and better yield. If you look at the photograph at the top, you can see it's green and the soybeans look good. If you look at the bottom, you can see the effect of the disease on all the brown leaves. So we enhance the effect of conventional agriculture. The holy grail here, however, is that we can actually potentially reduce the amount of fungicide that farmers spray. And farmers don't like to spray fungicides because they're enormously expensive. And of course, the rest of us don't want farmers to spray lots of fungicides because they're toxic products. So as a result of that, our revolutionary product is getting very strong support from influencers in Brazil, from government research organizations, and indeed from the regulatory authorities. Now, getting any product registered in Brazil can take a long time, anywhere between 2 years and 7 years. Now, right now, we are progressing very, very well through the regulatory system in Brazil. And if it continues to go as it is at the moment, then we have the potential to launch in the second half of next year, in roughly 12 months' time, when the next soy crop is being planted. Clearly, Brazil is Brazil. We could have problems with regulatory, but at this point, everything is going really, really well. And we are currently investing in in anticipation of that launch. So what we're doing first is the scaling up production, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So we'll have commercial supply available. And secondly, we're working with local distributors and international agrochemical companies to work out how we sell. And we'll either sell with one company who will cover the whole of Brazil for us, or we'll sell through 5 or 6 regional distributors. And we're investing very heavily in demonstration trials right across Brazil, which are going into the field in the next few weeks, with a network of 25 well-respected technical advisors who work only on seed treatment, and to whom distributors and growers turn for advice. So we're really, really excited about what we anticipate will be the first launch of any pre-tech peptide anywhere. But on the next slide, I don't want you to think that pre-tech peptides are just about Brazil soy. We're working right around the world with peptides, but particularly also in the US. And the same product, PHC-279, in a bunch of different crops, but also other peptides. I'd like to point to PHC-949, and that is targeted specifically at soil pests called nematodes. And in that case, we're getting results which are very comparable to toxic agrochemicals with a biological, environmentally friendly product. And that's particularly exciting and attracting a lot of interest. But PHC-404 and PHC-414 also are coming on behind. Now, the US, we anticipate launching in 2022 because we're working with a series of distributors who are still trialing the product. We had a little bit of a setback a few weeks ago that the EPA asked us to produce some more data for our submission for approval for PHC-279, and we're doing that, and we're now targeting therefore submission in the second half of approval in the second half of 2022 and launch later that year. Now, one of the great things is you've heard Jeff Tweedy talk about the relationships we've got with very, very large distributors in the US. You wouldn't be shocked if we came and said we're working with distributors like that in order to commercialize pre-tech peptides in the US. There is indeed a possibility to license pre-tech to other ag companies, but frankly, from where I sit today, why add an extra chain in the distribution channel? If we can sell directly to distribution, and these are very, very large, sophisticated, well-funded companies, particularly in the US, but also in Europe and Brazil. If we went to a major international company, they would sell to the same distributors as well, but they would demand a margin in between. So on the whole, I'm pretty convinced that selling direct to the distribution makes good sense. And finally, on pre-tech manufacturing, I'm really excited about this. There's a bunch of very good technologies out there, but unless you can make it cheaply, you will not get it adopted widely. And we proved manufacturing first at our own laboratories in Seattle, in Washington State, but over the last 9 months, also a pilot scale in laboratories in Penn State University. And it's Penn State that are ramping up production for the Brazil launch. And the cost of goods here is now at a level, you've heard that half and alpha beta has got a 70% plus gross margin. We are comfortably predicting that pre-tech peptides will have at least as good a margin as half and alpha beta. So that's really, really exciting. We're currently working with 2 or 3 candidates to do toll manufacture of pre-tech peptides for us. And those discussions are going well. We will not invest in our own plant. There are plenty of people who will manufacture for us cost effectively. And finally, on this slide, on patents, as I mentioned, our first patent has been granted. We've got a bunch of further patents coming along, and that's really, really important. We believe that we have captured all of the useful IP around the use of pesticides in agriculture, which, if any of you are investing in pharmaceuticals, peptides are very much a coming thing within pharmaceuticals, we believe that we've captured pretty much all the useful space of the use of peptides in agriculture. So if we move on then, I've just got one slide on the biological sector as a whole, which I think is important. And that is that, first of all, biologicals, everybody loves the idea of biologicals because you're replacing traditional toxic agrochemicals and, to some extent, fertilizers with environmentally friendly products. And there's a lot of money going into that, $3.5 billion in 2019. And there's a whole bunch of small startup technology companies which are investing that money in this area. The trouble is that not all of them will be successful. And there's a number of stranded assets here who haven't, maybe they've got good technology, but they don't know how to commercialize it. Or maybe their technology is just not very, very exciting. And we believe that there's going to be consolidation in this sector. And indeed, our distributor customers are telling that to us as well. They say we've got dozens of these little companies coming to us. We don't know what technologies work and which don't. And very often these small companies have no real clue about how to commercialize their products. And there's a leadership opportunity for a company which does have a profitable business, good commercial capabilities, good technical capabilities, and experience management. So we see there's potential here for growth by M&A. We're looking at that. That could be an opportunity for us. What I want to be absolutely clear about, however, is that we're not going to be acquiring technologies which are several years from market. We want to acquire technologies or companies which will help us to get to cash positive even more rapidly than our current plans. So watch this space. We are examining that actively at the moment. My last slide before I pass over to Jeff Hubby to talk about the financials is just how would you measure our success over the coming months? First of all, on commercial, we will and we must generate meaningful cash from our commercial operations this year and in the future. And right now, we're feeling very good about that. And we would need to show consistent sales growth. And a big part of that, as Jeff Tweedy has alluded to earlier, is making sure that we make sales to our customers which align with on-ground sales. We were not good at that in 2018, and that held back sales in 2019. We have much better visibility of on-ground sales now, and that should be working through. And as Jeff Tweedy has already mentioned, we're seeking to expand relationships with other major distributors. And on the pre-tech side, it's achieving those first registrations for PHC 279, reaching distribution and sales agreements, and securing low-cost manufacturing. And finally, on the group side, achieving cash positive quickly and making sure we generate sustainable profits beyond that. And when we've done all of that, seeking opportunities from consolidation. So that being said, I'd like to pass now to Jeff Hubby to run through our major financials.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Our first half 2020 revenue was around 3.1 million, which is an increase of 15%. Harpen, which represents 60% of our first half revenue, increased 43% from the prior year, or 48% in constant currency. Revenues are higher than prior year, mainly because of strong sales into the row and specialty crop in North America, as well as resumed sales into the sugarcane market in Brazil. Our gross margin increased 2% to 59%, primarily because of increased Harpen sales, as well as reduced third-party sales. Our third-party revenue is mainly driven from our Mexican subsidiary, which I'll talk about in a minute. As Jeff Tweedy said, Harpen continues to be a high margin for us, anywhere from 70 to 75% globally. North American revenue increased 50%, or 600,000 from 2019. And as Jeff said as well, the South American ground sales increased 2.5 times from 2019. Our EMEA region increased 9%, led by our Spanish business, which increased 29% over the prior year. Sales into the UK amenity market impacted by COVID, but sales into the potato market actually doubled from the 2019 levels. Our Mexican business is a very large revenue generating business for us, and it's also cash generative. Mexico sales in local currency were a little bit lower than 2019, mainly because of COVID. The impact of COVID was because of reduced domestic demand from fruit and veggie sales. From a USD perspective, the sales decreased 14%, mainly because of the devaluation of the peso from the beginning of 2020. Turning to expenses, our cash operating expenses decreased to $400,000, or roughly 10%, to $3.6 million, mainly because of lower sales and marketing costs. Our total operating expenses increased to $1.5 million, but most of that is because of a $2 million non-cash transitional loss because of intercompany loans. And the thing that we're most excited about is our adjusted EBITDA improved $600,000 to $1.8 million because of the increased margin and reduced operating expenses. Turning to the balance sheet, we keep a close eye on our cash, which was $5.1 million as of the end of June. That was higher than 2019 because in March of 2020 we did have a fundraise of $4.4 million. Our cash outflows decreased 29% to $2 million. Decrease was mainly due to reduced operating expenses, working capital initiatives, and we also did receive funds from the Payroll Protection Program offered by the Small Business Administration in the U.S., as well as a smaller loan from the Spanish government associated with COVID. As Jeff said, we have several working capital initiatives in place. We've made substantial progress in our days sales outstanding from the beginning of the year. We've reduced that from 50 days, and we've also, looking at our inventory levels, we aim to reduce those starting in 2021 through a couple of initiatives which could reduce our unit cost. As Jeff said, our cash burn was $2 million versus $2.9 million in 2019 in the same period.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I think that's the final slide, is it not, Chris?
It is indeed. That's the last one, Mark.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. Chris, Jeff, thank you very much for that, for the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted both during the live event and the ones that were pre-submitted, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, will be available via your Investor Meet company dashboard. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide your company-specific feedback in order that the company can understand your views and expectations. Chris, I'm just going to unmute Jeff because I put them on mute momentarily. Obviously, investors had the ability to pre-submit questions. We received a number of those, and just given both mindful of time, we've got enough time to go through these and perhaps then address those that have been submitted during the live event. So if I can start off with the first question we received was, can you update us on the Brazil opportunity and how has COVID affected this?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like one for you, Jeff Tweedy.
Yeah, it's a good question. The first half of the year was very difficult due to fall in ethanol prices. And this is really due to people not traveling because of COVID. Because of this, or the result was farmers began to tighten their belt. It's unclear what the impact of COVID will be in the second half. We do know that ethanol prices are coming back. But in spite of that, our sales, on-ground sales, were up 2.5 times in the first half compared to the prior year. And within these focus areas that we have sales reps on the ground, our on-ground sales were up 5x. So given the growers' concern over expenses, ethanol pricing, I feel very good about where we are today, how we're positioned, because we are delivering increased yield, and higher yield is higher revenue for a grower.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Can we expect to see increased sales through your channel, through your partner channels? And what visibility do you have on future revenues?
Yeah,
Go for it, Tweety.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I see what we do is, with the relationships that we have now, we sit down with our channel partners this time of year and really review their on-ground sales. Okay, where did we get to? And we also look at their inventory levels. And then we build out a plan for fourth quarter sales and then what they want to do for the next 12 months. We're right in the middle of that. So, those discussions have just begun. We've got the inventories back. Now we're looking at plans for 2021. But I would say early indications is that our customers are very bullish on where we're headed in 2021, and we've had positive signals. Our sales were up 15% in the first half, and so I think they feel good, and we're well positioned with these key customers.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. A question around cash flow. When do you expect to reach cash flow break even on a monthly basis, and is it sustainable?
Sounds like one for you, Jeff Harvey.
It is, yes. Very good question. Our revenue is very seasonal, and it's weighted towards the second half of the year, and our cash flows follow this trend. So we view our business in two different ways. We view it from the commercial business, as Chris said, and we also view it as with the new technology segment included. So based on this, as Chris said, we anticipate the commercial business being cash flow positive in 2020, with the consolidated, which includes the new technology, in the second half of 2022.
That's great, thank you. Certainly, Chris, this one is for you. The question is, Chris, having been the CEO of Arista Life Sciences and transforming that business to around $2 billion in sales, what do you see in plant healthcare that keeps you interested, as the share price doesn't seem to reflect the hard work over the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, but I'm really excited about this technology. I joined this company because I had heard about the technology and always wondered why it hadn't been more successful. I've met people over the years, colleagues of mine whom I rate highly, who spoke very, very well about the technology. And there's absolutely no doubt this technology works. It absolutely works in many, many areas. The challenge has been really on the commercial side. How do you get to market? How do you get the distribution right? And frankly, with Jeff Tweedy coming in 3 years ago, we finally cracked that. So our sales over the last few years have not reflected the value of the technology. I'm very confident that our sales over the next 3 years will start to vindicate our view of the technology. So I get up every morning excited about the technology and its potential. And I do think on the new technology, that this is possibly the most exciting new technology I've come across in many, many years. So I'm excited about it. And I guess finally, over the last 3 or 4 years, I bought what equates to just over 1% of the shares in this company from my own pocket. So I've got a fair amount invested in this company as well, and I intend to get a good return on that alongside the rest of the shareholders.
Thank you very much. 3 final questions. How much product do you have to sell to break even annually, and how far away are you from that?
Mr. Harvey?
That's another good question. So assuming we have the same level of spend in our new technology or the pre-tech technology, our break even from a product sales perspective is around 12 million.
Thank you very much. When do you think what do you think is a realistic revenue growth of the company?
Yeah, I'll take that one. If you look at the biological sector as a whole, that's growing at about 15% a year, compared with the conventional agrochemicals, which are growing at 1 to 2, possibly 3%. So the sector is growing quickly. First half of this year, we did 15%. So that's a pretty good basis on which to work. Our channel partners are expecting sales growth faster than that, but I'm not going to be making forward-looking statements today. But I think 15% is pretty good for our overall commercial business. On top of that, don't forget there's pre-tech. So once we start to commercialize that, all being well, towards the end of 2021, sales will ramp up 22, 23, 24, 25. And to be absolutely clear, we're expecting pre-tech will be on top of our commercial business, and we don't expect significant cannibalization. So we're excited about revenue growth, and we expect to deliver that, and it's the additional revenue with the working capital which will generate sustainable cash returns.
That's great, thank you. And the final question that we had pre-submitted by investors is, what competition do you face, and why would a larger player not just look to acquire Plant Healthcare for its technology?
Yeah, it's a really great question. First of all, this is a unique technology. There are a lot of companies out there that are making claims about how they can stimulate plants to grow faster or better. But the underlying technologies are very basic, seaweeds and composts and things like that. We achieve this through a really well-refined scientific approach using our recombinant protein, or in the case of pre-tech with the peptides. So there's no one else with a technology exactly like this. Why wouldn't a larger player just look to acquire the company for its technology? Well, it's interesting. The major companies, frankly, which are driven by chemistry, small molecule chemistry, many decades of tradition, I worked in them, they find it really hard to understand biological products. How do you evaluate them? How do you make them? How do you market them? Compared with conventional chemistry, it is that much more complicated. Now, they're beginning to wake up to it. We do have conversations with the big companies, and one day the lights will come on and they'll say, hey, we really do need to make some significant bets in this sector. And they know where we are. We're a public company, and who knows?
Perfect. Thanks very much indeed to Chris and the Jeffs. Well, that deals with the pre-submitted questions. Now, obviously, investors have now submitted a number of questions throughout the live presentation. If I could address you to the Q&A tab where you'll see them in there. If I could ask you to read out the questions where you can give a response currently, so investors can know what the response will then be against that. So that'd be great, Chris, if I could hand back to you.
Yeah, I'll just pick out a couple of those. Sean, you're asking how many Brazil opportunities are composed to clients in their second and third year of trials. Now, Tweedy may remember better than me, we've looked at these data. We are roughly half of the users this year are new users, which means that roughly half are in their second year. We tend not to lose very many. So it does accumulate. But as Tweedy has already pointed out, one of the frustrations about agriculture generally is how damn slow this is. Because you cut the cane, there's the photograph on the presentation above you. You cut the cane, you harvest it, and then it takes a year to grow again before you harvest it again. So every single farmer, he's got a bunch of money invested in his crop. He's just going to try it on a small area. It might be, if he's a small grower, it might be a hectare. In some cases, if he's a big grower, sometimes there'll be 10 or even 100 hectares will be a small trial for them. And they'll evaluate that after a year. Sometimes Brazil is Brazil, they forget to evaluate it, and so they start again. So then the second year, if it really works, and as we've said, very few of these, we've had very, very few failures, they will apply on a bit more. And it takes 3 or 4 years for them to build up. So our growth rate is a combination of those two effects. Tweedy, would you build on that?
No, I think you covered it well, Chris. I mean, you know, the most difficult thing about sugarcane is that it's a year. It takes a year to get the results. So, you know, I don't think the growth that we've seen is untypical of other products. And, you know, we just started, we kicked off a year ago, you know, to work with a lot of the processors as well. So I think as we get those, they get the data back, starting to see the yield, there's additional benefits that they'll see as well, mainly transportation costs. So I think as they start to see that and recognize it, it will become more adapted into their operations as well.
Thanks, Tweety. So maybe we can pick up, Albert, you're asking the question, is there a possibility to license Pretech to other ag companies rather than distributors? I spoke to that a little bit as we were going, but I do want to be clear that we work with all the large companies. They do trials on various Pretech peptides, mainly in the US and Brazil, and they continue to be very interested in it. So who knows where that could lead? But right now they'd have to make us a hell of a good offer, frankly, in order to make it more attractive than selling through distributors, except in the case of corn seed treatment, where actually Bayer, Corteva, and to an extent Syngenta absolutely dominate that market at the primary production area. We can access it through our distributor at the farm level, but for the big scale, for Pretech, that could be an interesting opportunity in the US. But generally speaking, we're very happy with working with our distributors. Our distributors are sophisticated organizations looking for differentiated products to sell. They're not just box shifters. And it's worth pointing out, these distributors have their own agronomists walking fields, talking to growers about what would work for their growers. Many of these agronomists have relationships going back decades with the farmers. The farmers trust them. Now, the merit that we have working with the big distributors is that we give them a white label product on which they make a really good margin. And for example, one of the distributors I could point to, 20% of their sales are white label products, but that represents 65% of their gross margin. So the agronomist on a farm, what's he going to recommend first? He's going to recommend first the product that makes him the better margin. So if we get the right economic incentives combined for the distribution, combined with the right technology, for me, that's absolutely the best way to get biological products onto the farm. So that's absolutely my view on that. Then Abby asked a great question, which is the kind of the $64 billion question. What do you see as the greatest risk to plant healthcare moving forward? And I'm going to ask each of the Jeffs to answer that question as well as me, because frankly, I think we've got a technology that really, really works. We've got good demand coming forward from growers around the world. One of the merits we have is that we have a presence in different parts of the world, US, Brazil, Europe in particular. And shit happens in agriculture. It gets too dry or it's too wet or whatever. So having our sales spread over a wide geographical area, for me, is a very, very important element in risk management. But Jeff Tweedy, Jeff Hovey, how would you ask? What keeps you awake at night?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. We do have it spread across different regions, which takes the risk out. Weather happens; it's going to happen in some part of the world. So I think that's why we want it in a very balanced business. So, and we can't control the weather. It is a risk, but it affects everybody. And so that's why it is good to be in different parts of the world, but also different crops. We're not just a one crop company. We probably make applications on 50 to 60 different crops. 15 are the key for us. So I think that's important as well, to take the risk out of the business.
Yeah, I would echo that. Certainly, I agree with the weather. I totally agree with the fact that we need to spread our sales throughout the world. And the payment terms are a potential issue for me that keeps me up at night globally. We have payment terms anywhere from 30 days to 180 days, depending on the global region. So that's probably one of the biggest items that keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I thought the CFO might refer to payment terms. He gives us a really hard time and makes sure that the Jeff Tweedy, who runs it, really runs a tight ship on working capital. And maybe there's one other question that I'd like to pick out here, which is, does Harp and Alpha Beta have any potential negative effects? For example, in stimulating the plant to much stronger growth, could it leave the plant with less strength, capacity, and reserve to respond to external disease and other pressures? I think it's a really, really great question. But I think and I'll ask Tweedy his opinion, but I'm not aware that I've ever had reported any of that effect. Now, clearly, if a plant is growing faster, it will need a little bit more nutrition. But plants are pretty good at taking nutrition from the soil if they need it. But the principal benefit of harpin alpha beta is exactly that the plant is healthier. One of the things, maybe one other way to think about this is that traditionally farming over the last 100 years has depended very heavily on nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium fertilizers. And so farmers traditionally put a lot of nitrogen on their fields. The crop has come up and looked healthy, and that's driven the green revolution. But what we now realize is that plants are much more complex organisms than that, and soils are much more complex. And so the analogy I give is that feeding traditional nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus fertilizers to your plant is like feeding your child on a diet of fat and sugar. You know, the child will grow up, but probably not the healthiest. What we're trying to do is promote the natural health of the plant. Some people have called it homeopathy for plants. It really is making the plant healthier, so we don't see it exhausting itself. Tweedy, would you feel different about that?
No, the only thing I would add to that, Chris, is that, you know, if you put a 2x rate, you don't see a 2x benefit. So there is a diminishing return. The other nice thing about harpin is it has 0 residues. So any crop that we put it on, there is no residue that goes into the food chain at all, which is exactly what consumers are demanding from biological products. So we have a great profile, and that really helps us from a regulatory standpoint, getting the registration and then maintaining them. And in fact, that particular aspect in California allowed us to accelerate a registration in California and add crops that we hadn't done data on. And they have actually come back to us and asked us to do data because they want to add them to it because it's such a good environmental profile.
Chris, hi, Chris. Sorry, I'm just obviously mindful of time because I know you do want to capture as much investor feedback as is possible. If there are any other questions, then feel free to grab them. If not, obviously we can review any questions post this presentation. Perhaps then I could just ask you to wrap up, and as I said, I'll divert investors for feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great time, I think, to wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. So really good questions in there. So, I mean, just to finalize, we are very convinced, very enthusiastic about this company just now. We've delivered a good first half of this year. We anticipate a strong second half. I'm not going to make forward-looking statements, but we're feeling good about the second half. And we are feeling good about revenue growth looking forward and a cash-generative commercial business. On top of that, Pretech is one of the most exciting technologies we'll find in the ag sector. And with our first launch coming along in 2021, we have great expectations from Pretech. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody. And we look forward to catching up with you again. And please do measure us against the milestones we put out there.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. So thank you, Chris, in the UK, and to both Jeffs in the US. Thank you very much for updating investors today. I'm sure they found that very useful. Could I ask investors please not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you access this meeting via our website, the feedback page will automatically appear. And if you accessed it via the link sent to you by email, you'll be simply asked to log in to submit your feedback. On behalf of the management team at Plant Healthcare, we'd like to thank you very much for attending today's presentation. That now concludes the session. Good afternoon to you all.